Rand, I need another episode of Fully Cinematic.
I had a pretty nice streak going and recapping movies without ever covering the same lead actor twice. But that all ends today. Damn you, Tom Cruise. Anyway, back in the 80s, MTV not only played actual music videos, but the then rock-focused network was supremely relevant, influential even. In fact, television shows and a certain pop song laden feature film about naval pilots used the youth-targeted cable station's quick-cut music and visuals formula to become the highest grossing movie of 1986, snagging an Oscar in the process. We'll come back to that momentarily. For now, let's get down to business. Our story begins aboard the USS Enterprise in the Indian Ocean, where radar detects an unauthorized aircraft in the skies above with Lieutenant Pete Mitchell, given the call sign Maverick for his disregard for rules and authority, and his Rio, Lieutenant Nick Goose Bradshaw. I don't know where the goose comes from. It turns out that the UA is a Russian MiG-28 and it's accompanied by a wingman. The American duo successfully scares him off, but Maverick's own wingman, Cougar, is shaken by the experience and turns in his wings after nearly crashing due to frayed nerves. He survived because Maverick talked him down and escorted him back to the carrier in his F-14A Tomcat. Because Cougar was the best pilot aboard, runners-up Mav and Goose are selected to attend the U.S. Navy Strike Fighter Tactics Instructor Program. You could probably see why they used the much shorter nickname Top Gun instead of that mouthful. After orientation in Miramar, California, Maverick meets his fiercest rival, Lieutenant Tom Iceman Kazansky. He also meets his love interest, Charlotte Blackwood, at a bar that night using a bull karaoke routine. And what do you know, the next morning he learns that she's also one of his instructors. Of course, she tries to passive-aggressively school him, but he turns the tables when he discloses some of the details of the MiG encounter. In turn, Charlie invites Maverick to tell her the rest of the story sometime. After a day of competition, Iceman confronts Mav for the second time over his recklessness. Later, Maverick calls Charlie out on her poorly concealed romantic interests, and she immediately asks him out. After an obvious appeal for repeat viewings by female ticket buyers, a shirtless volleyball game designed solely for the female gaze, Mav heads to Charlie's place while the song Take My Breath Away plays for the first of many times. The two eat and chat about Maverick's parents before he rides off on his motorcycle to take my breath away again. The next day, Charlie fesses up to her feelings while the song plays for the third time. Later, we meet Goose's family before Charlie puts Maverick on blast in front of the entire class, leading him to ride off to a fourth round of Take My Breath Away. This time, Charlie admits that she's in love, and Mav gives her the business. Subsequently, we get the stupid catchphrase, I feel the need for speed, because slogans aren't quite corny enough unless they rhyme. Anyway, after another day of rash decision-making, Ice checks Maverick again. And though she previously told him that she was concerned about how she'd be perceived for getting involved with a student, Charlie goes on a double date with Maverick and Goose and You Got Mail at a bar. Incidentally, the latter proceeds to talk too damn much, filling Charlie in about Maverick's past flings and telling her that he's in love. Oh man. The following day, Maverick goes into an uncontrolled spin during maneuvers, prompting him and ER to eject. But tragically, a malfunction during the ejection proves to be fatal for Gilbert from Revenge of the Nerds. Of course, Vanilla Sky blames himself, but he's cleared by an official board of inquiry. Guilt-ridden, he blows another maneuver and throws a fit when Theo, the hacker from Die Hard, calls him one. Even Doc Holliday tries to console him, but Jerry Maguire decides to quit the day before graduation. Charlie catches him before he can leave without a goodbye, and he heads over to head instructor Commander Mike Viper Metcalf's house for a man-to-man. Viper admits that he flew with Maverick's dad, Duke Mitchell, and confides that, contrary to public opinion, Duke died a hero, but the military has kept the details of his death classified. The third Batman wins Top Gun, and both he and the Last Samurai are assigned to the Enterprise. They participate in a rescue mission which goes wrong, and Hollywood, one of the best Top Gun pilots, is shot down. As a consequence, Maverick is sent to back up Iceman, who's being pursued by 5 MiGs. After another spin, Eyes Wide Shut freaks out, but he recovers and demonstrates that he's finally learned to not bail on his wingman. When Iceman strafed twice, Maverick manages to shoot down his pursuer. And after another MiG gets a missile lock on Maverick, he pulls his signature move, which allows the prey to get the drop on the Predator and take him out, prompting the remaining bogies to disengage. As reward for his heroism, Maverick's given the freedom to choose his next posting, which ends up being Top Gun instructor. Mav and Charlie reunited at a bar and danced to the Everly Brothers song that brought them together in the first place. Top Gun epitomizes the idea of style over substance, and clearly that cinematic philosophy was exactly what moviegoers wanted in 1986. However, the film does provide an important lesson. Instead of overcoming some bigger, stronger foe, Maverick matures, learns from failure, and figures out that being an asshole isn't all that it's cracked up to be. Capitalizing on the Cold War anti-Russian paranoia of the Reagan era, and following the basic premise of Iron Eagle and Firefox, Top Gun is essentially a slick music video album filled with imagery ripped straight out of a teenage American male's dorm room. Jets, check. Motorcycles, check. Unless you think that this film was only made for guys, the half-assed love story, men in uniform, and slow-motion game of shirtless volleyball was aimed squarely at Becky and Karen. Hell, their bedroom walls have been covered with posters of Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer since before the movie was released. Though he's commonly perceived to be the movie's secondary villain, Iceman's criticisms of Maverick are completely justified. And FYI, Charlotte was based on a real person, civilian instructor Christine Fox. This thing's star-studded. You got Tom Skerritt, Michael Ironside, Adrian Pasdar, Anthony Edwards, Meg Ryan, Clarence Gilliard, and Rick Rossovich. You may not recognize all of the names, but if you're familiar with 80s film and television, you've seen plenty of them before. As with other 80s hits, the filmmakers called on soundtrack guru Kenny Loggins to deliver a mega hit theme song for the proceedings, following in the steps of A Star is Born's I Believe in Love, Caddyshack's I'm All Right, and Footloose's, well, Footloose. Danger Zone took Top Gun into the stratosphere. Big pun intended. This musical flick about fighter pilots propelled Ray-Ban sales through the roof and tricked countless guys into enlisting in the armed services to boot. Though without a war for the remainder of the decade, even the few who actually made it into an F-16 cockpit never fought it out with their Russian counterparts. In 1985, Tom Cruise starred in Legend for director Ridley Scott. A year later, he headlined Top Gun for his brother Tony. 9 years after that, he'd reunite with fellow fighter weapons school competitor Tim Robbins in a pretty decent remake of War of the Worlds. And while Maverick was far from Cruise's first starring role, it was the template for a particular film persona, which would reappear with small tweaks several more times throughout his career. Such as, you ask? Well, there was the cocky young pool hustler, the cocky young bartender, the cocky young stock car racer, the cocky young sports car hustler with daddy issues, the cocky young pickup artist with daddy issues, the cocky young millionaire playboy, and of course, the cocky young espionage agent. Was a Top Gun sequel really necessary? Are any follow-up movies necessary? Well, in some cases, yeah. Namely, to make up for the massive potential wasted by its predecessor. In some instances, to repair the damage done to an iconic character or an entire franchise by garbage pail entries. Here's looking at you, Rocky V, MI2, Star Wars prequel trilogy. But I digress. You get the picture. Besides, Top Gun left us with burning questions like, how long will the Navy put up with Maverick's bull? Will he ever truly come to terms with his father's legacy? And how did Tim Robbins fit into one of those cockpits? At any rate, 36 years later, the US and Russia hate each other again, and Duke Mitchell's kid is flying back in the theaters. I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same. By the way, the Oscar that Top Gun took home was for Best Original Song, naturally. Berlin's Take My Breath Away, if you were wondering. In other news, it's time to highlight a few comments that viewers left on previous videos. After watching the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness show, Phase 4 Fit Life said, this movie's about to make $1 billion. Wait until tomorrow and Saturday. It made over 400 mil the first weekend, Phase 4, so it's got a pretty good shot. And Maverick Barbecue chimed in with, I told them to take my money a long time back. In response to my Jack Reacher review, Danielle M. said, hey Rand, I love listening to your voice. You're very informative. Thanks, Danielle. I can't end on a much higher note than that. So shout out to Phase 4 Fit Life, Maverick Barbecue, and Danielle M. for dropping comments. And shout out to everybody who subscribed to the channel. But I had about enough of this conversation and I'm logging off.
Fully cinematic.